Marcus Carter had always been proud of his land, not because it was the biggest or the fanciest, but because it was his. Every board in his barn told a story of hard work and survival. Built by his own hands with the help of his late father, the barn stood as a symbol of his family's strength. Inside, he stored the tools that kept his small farm alive, the hay that fed his animals, and the memories of generations who had once worked the same soil. To Marcus, the barn wasn't just wood and nails, it was his heritage. That morning, he woke to an unfamiliar rumble outside his window. At first, he thought it was thunder, but as the sound grew louder, his stomach sank. He rushed out the door and froze at the sight of heavy machinery tearing into the walls of his barn. Dust filled the air, wood splintered like gunfire, and the animals scattered in fear. HOA board members stood nearby in crisp suits, arms folded, smirks on their faces, as if they were the law itself. They shouted that his barn was non-compliant, that it lowered the value of the neighborhood. Marcus tried to reason, shouting over the roar of the bulldozers, but no one listened. His protests were drowned out by engines and laughter. Within hours, the barn that had taken years to build was reduced to a broken pile of rubble, nothing more than dust on the wind. Standing there, Marcus felt his chest ache, as if a piece of his own soul had been ripped away. The HOA walked off, as though nothing had happened, proud of their victory, while Marcus remained in the wreckage, silent, grieving, and burning with a quiet fury he would never forget. That night, long after the dust of his barn had settled, and the silence of loss filled the air, Marcus wandered across his land with heavy steps. Every corner of his property carried memories of his family, especially his grandfather, who had taught him the meaning of resilience. His grandfather often spoke of the lake that bordered their land, a lake that people now admired for its beauty, but rarely questioned in origin. Marcus knew the truth. It wasn't a natural gift from nature, but a man-made reservoir, created decades ago by damming a stream that ran through the Carter family's soil. As a boy, Marcus had followed his grandfather down to the far edge of their property, where weeds grew wild and stones half buried in earth concealed something most people had forgotten: a massive iron valve built into the ground. His grandfather had once placed his hand on Marcus's shoulder and whispered, "This is our power, son. The lake may look like it belongs to them, but the water comes through us. Remember that, but use it only when the land demands respect." For years, Marcus had never given it much thought. He believed in living peacefully, working hard, and letting others enjoy the lake without conflict. But now, with the image of his destroyed barn burning in his mind, his grandfather's words struck with new weight. That valve wasn't just rusting metal. It was a reminder that the Carter family still held control over something the HOA valued more than anything. Standing there in the moonlight, Marcus brushed away the overgrown weeds and stared at the wheel. He didn't touch it yet, but deep inside, a storm was brewing. For the first time, he felt the land calling on him to defend itself, and Marcus knew the day would come when he would answer. The lake had always been the crown jewel of the community, the very reason people paid absurd amounts of money to live under the strict rules of the HOA. On summer mornings, children splashed in the shallow water while parents lounged on the grassy banks, sipping cold drinks and snapping photos of the sparkling waves. Couples rented paddleboats in the evenings, drifting lazily under the painted skies of sunset, while tourists flocked from nearby towns to catch a glimpse of what the brochures proudly called the heart of the resort. The HOA bragged constantly that the lake raised property values and gave their neighborhood an image of exclusivity, a place for the wealthy to retreat in comfort. They polished their speeches at meetings, praising themselves for protecting the beauty of the community, all while sneering at Marcus as though he were nothing more than an old relic stuck in the past. Behind closed doors, they laughed about him, mocking his weathered barn before they destroyed it, calling him stubborn and out of place. They saw themselves as untouchable, so proud of their glittering lake that they never imagined how fragile it really was. Each day, Marcus passed by the water with a heavy heart, watching families enjoy the resort, while the memory of his barn's destruction replayed in his mind. Anger burned inside him, but he held it tight, silent and patient. His grandfather had taught him that rushing into revenge was weakness, and strength was knowing when to strike. Standing by the shore one evening, Marcus let the cool water run over his hand, and he smiled faintly. The HOA believed the lake gave them power, but Marcus knew the truth. They were living off his family's land, and without it, everything they built would crumble. The night was heavy with silence, the kind that made even the crickets quiet, as Marcus walked toward the far end of his land. The memory of his barn, once proud and full of life, now reduced to broken wood, and ash clung to him with every step. The moon hung low, casting silver light over the fields, and the air carried the faint scent of wet earth. Marcus's boots crunched against gravel as he reached the hidden place his grandfather had shown him long ago. The weeds had grown thick around the stones, but his hands were steady as he pulled them back, revealing the great iron valve buried beneath. For years, he had respected its power, leaving it untouched, because peace had always been more important than pride. But tonight was different. Tonight, the land demanded justice. He crouched low, running his hand along the rusted wheel, feeling its cold bite against his skin. His heart pounded as if echoing the weight of generations. Men who had worked this land, protected it, and trusted it to provide. Slowly, he gripped the valve with both hands and pulled. At first, it resisted, groaning in protest after years of stillness. But Marcus pressed harder, muscles straining, sweat beading on his brow. Then, with a grinding creak, the wheel began to turn. Deep underground, a roar answered, water rushing, shifting, obeying. The sound grew louder, echoing through the night like a beast awakened from slumber. Marcus stood over the wheel, breathing heavy, the wind tugging at his shirt, his eyes fixed on the dark silhouette of the lake in the distance. He had not destroyed anything yet, but he had set something in motion, something unstoppable. For the first time since his barn fell, Marcus felt not broken, but powerful. Morning came, and with it, whispers of worry spread across the resort. The lake that once shimmered under the sunrise now looked strangely shallow. At first, the HOA dismissed the concerns, claiming it was just a seasonal drop, nothing to panic about. But by the second day, the truth became impossible to ignore. The shoreline retreated further and further, leaving boats stranded in mud, docks standing on dry earth, and fish gasping in the shrinking pools of water. The jewel of the community was dying. Families who had paid fortunes for their lakeside paradise began to panic. Tourists demanded refunds, and anger turned toward the HOA, who had promised them perfection. Meetings grew heated, voices raised, and lawsuits threatened as the once proud board scrambled for excuses. Marcus watched from a distance, calm and silent, as chaos swallowed the people who had laughed while destroying his barn. The lake that had made them arrogant now betrayed them, exposing the fragile foundation of their pride. He didn't gloat, nor did he boast. He simply rebuilt. Each day, he laid new boards for his barn, stronger and taller than before, his hands steady with purpose. Neighbors who once ignored him now looked at him with quiet respect, some even with guilt in their eyes, as the dried-up